This is Truth in Media. I'm Ben Swann, and today on the show we're taking a look at two new bombshell developments on the attacks of 9/11. The first, that for the very first time, the fire commissioners of the New York Fire District have voted unanimously to call for a new investigation into 9/11. It's based on evidence, they say, of explosives bringing down those buildings. Listen.
The overwhelming evidence presented in said petition demonstrates beyond any doubt that pre-planted explosives and/or incendiaries, not just airplanes and the ensuing fires, caused the destruction of the three World Trade Center buildings.
And the second bombshell, a new $300,000 study has been published by the University of Alaska, and it proves that World Trade Center 7, the third building to come down on 9/11, did not come down the way that federal agencies have claimed for years. We're going to show you exactly what that study has found. All of it today on Truth in Media. Hey everyone, welcome to the program. A lot to get to today regarding new developments on the attacks of 9/11. But before we go further, I want to talk about our amazing sponsor for this segment, PureVPN. We all know how important it is to protect your privacy online, and PureVPN does exactly that. With fast, secure, anonymous VPN IPs, military-grade encryption, and a global network of VPN servers starting at just $2 a month. Directly support the Truth in Media podcast by signing up at truthinmedia.com/VPN and keep your identity protected. Now, back to the two big developments I've been telling you about that, of course, mainstream media is completely ignoring, pretending as if none of these things have happened. The first, as I mentioned, is this pretty remarkable resolution calling for a new investigation into 9/11. It was made just a few weeks ago by the Franklin Square and Munson Fire District in New York City. The Board of Fire Commissioners just weeks ago unanimously passed a resolution claiming, quote, overwhelming evidence of pre-planted explosives and/or incendiaries, which they say caused the destruction of the three World Trade Center buildings. Here's a clip from that meeting on August 1st of this year.
Whereas the victims of 9/11, their families, the people of New York City, and our nation deserve that every crime related to the attacks of September 11, 2001 be investigated to the fullest, and that every person who was responsible face justice. Now, therefore, be it resolved that the Board of Fire Commissioners of the Franklin Square and Munson Fire District fully supports a comprehensive federal grand jury investigation and prosecution of every crime related to the attacks of September 11th, 2001, as well as any and all efforts by other government entities to investigate and uncover the full truth surrounding the events of that horrible day.
I'm going to put the resolution to a vote. Commissioner Malloy?
Aye.
Commissioner Lyons?
Aye.
Commissioner Zaragoza? Commissioner Blair?
Aye.
Commissioner Saltzman?
Aye.
Resolution passes.
Thank you.
So you heard there the call for the new investigation, but what does it actually mean? Well, the Franklin Square and Munson Fire Department, which oversees a volunteer fire department serving a hamlet of about 30,000 residents just outside of Queens, New York, became the first legislative body in the country, the very first, to officially support a new investigation into the events of 9/11. Now, all of this is happening on the backdrop of a brand new study published by the University of Alaska by Dr. Leroy Hulsey. Hulsey has a very accomplished background and has determined that there is only one way for World Trade Center 7, Building 7, to have come down. Just one way. Let's break it down for you right now in this reality check. It has been 18 years since the terror attacks of 9/11. On that day, 2 towers fell in New York City, right? Well, actually, that's wrong. 3 towers fell. The North and South Towers of the World Trade Center, also known as the Twin Towers, and a third building, World Trade Center Building 7. In fact, here is video of Building 7 as it came crashing down that day. 6 years ago, I went to New York to report on a campaign to raise awareness about Building 7. More to the point, to raise awareness that over 3,000 engineers say that building could not have fallen down the way that our government says it did. Well, now today we're going to release to you the results of a $300,000 study conducted by scientists at the University of Alaska. Those PhDs have used computer technology to prove that the way the National Institute of Standards and Technology says that Building 7 came down was not only wrong, it's impossible. Furthermore, they can now say with absolute certainty that there is only one way that building could have come down, and that is for the entire core of support beams to fail at the same time. So how can that happen? I'll show you in this reality check that you won't get anywhere else. Well, before we go further, I want to mention that this reality check is brought to you by the Life app. Every time you use the Life app to make a purchase, not only do you earn rewards and receive cash back, but you can also receive crypto back. It is, in fact, the easiest way to save money on purchases that you are already making every day at hundreds of retailers. But it's also the easiest way to get and to use cryptocurrency. Also, by using the Life app, you directly support Reality Check and the Truth in Media podcast. Sign up at truthinmedia.com/life, where you will be redirected to sign up there. So, it was 6 years ago that I traveled to New York City just before 9/11 to report on claims that were being made by the group Architects and Engineers for 9/11 Truth. That claim was on 9/11, the third building that came down that day could only have been taken out through a total failure of support columns. That's what they were saying. Now, we would know this as something called a controlled demolition. Take a look.
And in a controlled demolition, when you have a core and an exterior, and you take the core out, it pulls in the exterior and it comes down.
What happens if you leave half of them? So if it's not a controlled demolition, if you just have a failure of half the columns,
You'd have a partial collapse.
Again, that was 6 years ago, and yet now on the 18th anniversary of the 9/11 attacks, a new study has just been published, one that took hundreds of thousands of dollars and several years to complete. The groundbreaking Building 7 study, a structural reevaluation of the collapse of World Trade Center 7, was conducted by Dr. Leroy Hulsey, a PhD, as well as two other researchers at the University of Alaska. It is a finite element analysis that uses computer modeling based on the original blueprints for World Trade Center 7 to determine what could and what could not have caused the collapse. The study examines NIST conclusions and finds them to be untenable. So what was the conclusion of NIST, or the National Institute of Standards and Technology? Watch this.
World Trade Center 7 collapsed because of fires fueled by office furnishings. It did not collapse from explosives or from fuel oil fires.
We really have a new kind of progressive collapse that we have discovered here, which is a fire-induced progressive collapse.
So to be clear, despite there being small and isolated fires on just a few floors, the 47-story Building 7 came down symmetrically into its own footprint in just under 7 seconds at 5:20 p.m. on 9/11. The official investigation into the collapse was conducted by NIST. It's an agency under the U.S. Department of Commerce, which concluded that, again, normal office fires were responsible for the failure of the structure, saying that falling debris from World Trade Center's North Tower flew and crashed into Building 7 and then ignited small office and furniture fires throughout several floors of the building. And that those fires burned for so long and so hot they caused thermal expansion and pushed beams off their girders, which led to the collapse of the building. But now this extensive study by the University of Alaska Fairbanks has proven that the NIST conclusion is actually wrong.
We created a solid model in Atticus of the structural members in the northeast corner of the 13th floor of WTC 7, and a finite element analysis was then performed to replicate the results claimed in the NIST WTC 7 report that girder A2001 was pushed or rocked off its seats at columns 44 and 79 to initiate the collapse of the building. And it's not possible for it to move the girder web beyond the seat claimed by NIST. They're saying it got shoved off and fell down. The fact of the matter is they didn't have the side plates on it. They weren't there in their model. So they wouldn't have found that.
The executive summary of the UAF study finds that, quote, fires could not have caused weakening or displacement of structural members capable of initiating any of the hypothetical local failures alleged to have triggered the total collapse of the building. Nor could any local failures, even if they had occurred, have triggered a sequence of failures that would have resulted in the observed total collapse. Well, this leads Dr. Halsey and his colleagues to this, quote, it is our conclusion based upon these findings that the collapse of World Trade Center 7 was a global failure involving the near simultaneous failure of all columns in the building and not a progressive collapse involving the sequential failure of columns throughout the building. Well, that failure of columns would mean that nearly all of the columns in the base of the building would have to have been taken out simultaneously. Remember, this is a building that on 9/11 was never hit by a plane. It simply collapsed. What's more, Dr. Halsey's conclusion does match a theory that has long been promoted by so-called 9/11 truthers, that explosives were actually used to bring down Building 7. So what you need to know is that in the history of fully completed and standing skyscrapers, there has never been a high-rise building that has collapsed from fire. It had never happened until NIST claimed that it happened at World Trade Center 7. What you need to know is that it took Dr. Halsey and his team more than 4 years to publish this study, which again used finite element computer simulations and high-tech computer modeling. And what they found was that despite the claims made by NIST, fire could not have brought down World Trade Center 7. The only reason NIST came to that conclusion was because they used wrong information to create their hypothesis.
Now, here we're going to show you a videotape of the collapse itself.
Describe that.
Now we go to videotape, the collapse of this building.
And what you need to know is that the models that Dr. Halsey used demonstrate that there is only one way the World Trade Center 7 could have fallen the way it did. The only way is the failure of every column at nearly the same time.
In time to see what looked like a skyscraper implosion. Looked like it had been done by a demolition crew.
It was almost as if it were a planned implosion.
That's a reality check. Let's talk about it on social media, if we still can. So the question now is, where do we go from here? The report is finished and the public comment on that report will be open until November 1st of this year, 2019. But this week also kicks off a tour of Dr. Halsey speaking about his findings in the study. There will also be events with the New York City Fire Commissioners who will be discussing their unanimous resolution. So joining me now to talk about all of these developments 18 years after 9/11 is Richard Gage. He is the president of Architects and Engineers for 9/11 Truth. And before we go to Richard, a shout out to our sponsor for this segment, Pulse Cellular. You can support the Truth in Media podcast by purchasing one of Pulse's no contract, no credit check plans, which include, by the way, unlimited talk, text, and 50 gigs of high-speed data, plus unlimited hotspot and zero-rated data usage on streaming apps. Get an additional 10% off your bill every month by signing up at truthinmedia.com/phone, and be sure to use the code TRUTH. So Richard, obviously, you guys have a lot planned. You have a news conference you're going to be holding at the National Press Club in Washington, D.C. Tell me a little bit about what you're going to be revealing this year that people have not heard before.
Yeah, this is a very exciting year for us. We're bringing Christopher Gioia and Joseph T. from the Franklin Square Munson Fire District to Washington, D.C. because they're on fire, right? They want to tell the world the truth about what happened on 9/11. 5 of these fire commissioners from this New York area fire district have voted unanimously for a resolution demanding a new investigation. So they're trying to get all the firefighters worked up about this. So this is the subject of the National Press Club press conference. So they will, after that press conference, go with us to walk the halls of Congress. We have about a dozen, and by September 11th, probably 24 meetings, many of which are with congressional representatives themselves. So this is very exciting. We've never walked into the halls of Congress with a uniformed fire commissioner or two. And also the husband and wife team, Bob and Helen McIlvaine, who lost their son Bobby in the South Tower due to explosions, which is, of course, the whole theme here. We're talking about explosions at the World Trade Center towers, heard and seen and experienced by more than 156 first responders orally on tape talking about that. Of course, none of these explosions are a part of the official record or report by NIST, the National Institute of Standards and Technology, for any of these 3 World Trade Center skyscrapers.
And I know that for years now, you all have been making the case that that is not even possible. Like, there is no legitimate answer being given by NIST for how that building came down. Is that still essentially the synopsis?
Oh, not only that. Yeah. I mean, the evidence shows that this building came down by explosive controlled demolition. Building 7, the 3rd tower, that for those who aren't familiar with it, drops like a rock straight down uniformly, symmetrically into its own footprint after witnesses hear explosions. So yes, we've received a lot of information about this building through the Freedom of Information Act. And more interestingly, we've hired the University of Alaska's one of the top forensic structural engineers in the country, Professor Leroy Halsey, the chairperson of the civil engineering department there, to conduct a 4-year, $300,000 study. So this is the work that NIST should have done but didn't. Finite element analysis computer modeling that proves that this building could not have come down by fire. So we'll be presenting this at the National Press Club as well. And then guess what? He goes on to tell us exactly how it could have come down. In fact, by God, if you take out all 82 columns on at least 8 floors of this building, it comes down exactly like the videos of the collapse of the building on September 11th at 5:20 in the afternoon. So there's no mystery about this, Ben.
As you said, that this building not only came down as a result of a controlled demolition, but it is completely physically impossible for it to have come down the way that NIST has claimed that it came down.
Yeah, this is an extraordinary report, 128 pages of 4 years of this group's work. They take NIST's very assumptions. Now, these are at least a dozen false and fraudulent assumptions on the part of the National Institute of Standards and Technology, but they take them anyway. And the building still doesn't fall. A local collapse cannot possibly generate a systematic collapse in about 10 seconds through this building, as NIST claims, gutting the inside of it, and then the exterior falls, as we've seen in the videos. Just for those who don't know, Google Building 7 collapse, and you'll see it looks exactly like the old hotels in Las Vegas. And yes, they also take out NIST's faulty assumptions and put in the accurate assumptions. And of course, the building is even more sturdy. So in order to get this building to fall, they have to systematically, simultaneously remove all the core columns, and a fraction of a second later, the exterior columns at once. Now, the question for our viewers is, can fire have this level of precision? Absolutely not.
Let me ask you this. In the study, is there anything that indicates multiple ways the building could have come down, or is it really come down to only one singular way?
Oh, there's only one way that this building could be taken down in the computer model, and that's exactly how it was taken down in reality. All those columns have to be removed at once. Any other scenario could not duplicate by any stretch of the imagination the actual visible failure modes that this building exhibited on the videos. And by the way, fire has never brought down a skyscraper before 9/11. Skyscrapers are fireproofed. They have 2 and 3 hour fire protection around the columns and beams in the building. The fire only lasts for 20 or 30 minutes in a given area. So NIST has to claim somehow that the fire, in their original report, that this fire was going on for an hour and a half to 2 hours immediately prior to these beams thermally expanding, which is the new phenomena that NIST claims brought this building. Thermally expanding beams which pushed a girder off of its seat on this column 79 under the east penthouse, causing this vertical collapse all the way from the east penthouse down, and then somehow in 6 seconds this collapse has to travel laterally across this football-sized building gutting the inside of the building, and then what we see on the video, they tell us, is the exterior of the building collapsing. None of that could be true. It's proven 6 ways from Sunday in this landmark study, computer finite element analysis by the University of Alaska.
Well, that is our report for you today. Thanks for watching, and keep in mind, throughout the program today, you've seen a lot of ads for sponsors. I would encourage you to head over to truthinmedia.com and support our sponsors. It is with their support and their help that we continue to fight to restore truth in media. And also, join our Reality Check group on Facebook. It is the actual group. You can apply to be a part of it. A lot of folks are telling us they're having trouble getting notifications about new episodes as they come up. Join that group, Ben Swann Reality Check on Facebook, and you'll see every notification as it comes up. I'll see you guys next week.